And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead, we've got details on the virtual meeting between President Biden and Vladimir Putin and new data about the Omicron variant. Plus,
we're standing at an inflection point in world history. We have the ability to invest in ourselves and build an equitable, clean energy future, and in the process, create millions of good-paying jobs and opportunities around the world.
That clean energy may be blowing in the wind, and energy experts say it could decrease America's dependence on foreign oil. We'll look at the challenges and the drawbacks, and we're on the set of The Chosen's first Christmas movie with some of the players behind the soundtrack.
It's kind of surreal, watching the Bible really come to life and the things that you see.
Some of our worship songs are very much about what we've been through, what we're going through. This is just about God.
All these stories and more are next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
I want to begin this half hour with President Biden and Vladimir Putin talking virtually about the escalating crisis of Russia's troops near the border of Ukraine. The president told Putin if he invades Ukraine, his country would face painful sanctions that could do harm to its economy. According to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, President Biden was very direct and straightforward with the Russian president. Biden was clear the U.S. and our allies support Ukraine's sovereignty and would respond with harsh economic measures if Russia moves forward with an invasion. Sullivan stressed these are measures that were not on the table in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea. Now a diplomatic solution is definitely preferred and being pursued. And the White House believes Putin is still deciding how he wants to proceed. Some other consequences mentioned is if Russia does not de-escalate include supplying provision and materials to Ukraine and deploying U.S. assets and capabilities to our NATO allies in the Baltic region. No information was given on Putin's side of the conversation or what demands he came into the conversation with. But we know Biden did not make any commitments to Russia. USCP Inspector General Michael Bolton has overseen 8 reports trying to explain the force's failures on January 6th. His consistent conclusion and repeated response to the Senate Rules Committee, the department needs more training. CBN's Brody Carter is on this story.
What happened on January 6th must never be allowed to happen again.
Lawmakers are looking for ways to strengthen U.S. Capitol Police after pro-Trump protesters stormed Congress. The violence on January 6 injured about 140 officers. One woman was shot and killed by police outside the House chamber. 4 officers also died by suicide in the days and months after the riot.
How many officers have left the department since January the 6th?
I don't have the exact numbers as far as those, but I believe it's been around 200 or so.
The Inspector General of U.S. Capitol Police testified Tuesday that a lack of training, emergency plans, and lack of intelligence data provided to congressional police led to this. Since that fateful day, Capitol Police have logged more than 700,000 hours of mandatory overtime, and congressional lawmakers have received more than 4,000 threats of violence, double the prior year. Bolton says they are understaffed and not prepared for another attack on the Capitol. Meantime, House committee members are hitting walls while investigating key Trump allies. Retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn and former U.S. Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark will both likely plead the Fifth when questioned about overturning the 2020 election and who's responsible for the Capitol riots. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows surprised investigators by announcing he will refuse to cooperate with investigators. He had been expected to comply after Trump's former chief counselor, Steve Bannon, surrendered to the FBI on 2 counts of congressional contempt. His criminal trial is set for July.
It is our duty to honor those officers who have given their lives, but also ensuring the safety of all those working and visiting the Capitol complex.
As the investigation continues, some House GOP members are comparing the treatment of those arrested in the riot to that of prisoners of Guantanamo Bay.
They are told that their views are the views of cult members, even though these are men that every single night at 9 o'clock at night, they put their hand over their heart and sing the national anthem voluntarily.
This investigation will continue into the new year. The Senate's Rule Committee will question the Capitol Police Chief next. Now turning to the latest on COVID-19, new data suggests the Omicron variant is less severe than Delta. That is according to the World Health Organization and Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Remember, these are still in the form of anecdotal, but hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll get a much clearer picture. But it appears that with the cases that are seen, we are not seeing a very severe profile of disease.
The Omicron variant is now in at least 20 states. COVID cases overall continue to surge at about 1,100 people dying each day. 1,400 children are being hospitalized as well. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is faced with a federal judge in Georgia blocking its vaccine mandate for federal contractors. The White House says the measures for contractors were implemented to protect the business's workforce, the customers, and communities. With Christmas around the corner and goods stalled in the global supply chain, Americans wonder whether gifts will find their way under the Christmas tree in time. That was the focus of a congressional hearing examining the major delays and price increases stemming from the impact of COVID-19 on shipping.
We truly are in uncharted waters. We've experienced localized port congestion in the past. But what we're seeing today is completely unprecedented. In the 60-plus years of containerized shipping, this is the first time that we have seen global supply chain congestion.
Witnesses pointed to the global pandemic and bottlenecks at ports and harbors, with congestion extending into trucks and railroads as well as on land. Key indicators hint the worst of the supply chain crisis is over and inflation will soon cool off. The Chicago public school system is getting rid of designating boys and girls bathrooms and instead making them gender neutral.
One change that will be implemented this school year relates to our school bathrooms. In compliance with new federal guidelines, all CPS students and staff will have fair and equitable access to bathroom facilities that align with their gender identity. We will be providing.
The school is set to adopt new signage as they step forward with gender equity for students and staff. You can read this full story at cbnnews.com. Instagram announced new ways for parents to track what their children are doing. Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri says the new features will allow parents to set time limits and see how much time they're spending on the app. They will also be notified if their child reports someone to Instagram. A parenting expert likes this idea.
Should be limits. We need to give our kids limits. We need to know what they're doing, how they're using social media, and help them develop a healthier relationship with it.
Critics say the new features do not go far enough. They announced plans come just before the senators question the chief today on the impact of the mental health on teachers. Coming up, wind power could become the main source of energy for our homes in the future, but what are some challenges and drawbacks? We're going to explore that next. Stay with us.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Just one rotation of an offshore turbine can power a home for an entire day. It's just one of a number of renewable resources in the Biden administration's plan to phase out fossil fuels over the next decade. But there are challenges to going green. Our Caitlin Burke takes a look.
In the not-so-distant future, one of the main energy sources powering your home could be located more than 25 miles offshore.
The goal set by the Biden administration seeks to power more than 10 million homes by the end of the decade. It's part of an overall plan to cut carbon dioxide emissions.
We're standing at an inflection point in world history. We have the ability to invest in ourselves and build an equitable, clean energy future, and in the process, create millions of good-paying jobs and opportunities around the world.
The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is now law, provides money to pursue those goals at a more accelerated pace. $65 billion will go specifically to clean energy transmission and the electric grid. Some states are already implementing renewable energy sources. Virginia-based Dominion Energy launched an offshore wind pilot program over the summer and is now moving forward with a large-scale commercial wind project.
Yes, so the pilot program, the total rating of the project is 12 megawatts, whereas the commercial project will be 2,600 megawatts. So that 12 megawatts at peak output powers 3,000 homes in our Virginia service territories, whereas that 2,600 megawatts will power up to 660,000 homes at its peak output.
These pilot turbines are the first built in federal waters, and just one rotation of those arms could power a home for an entire day.
It's a nice complement to solar power. So solar power will produce the most energy like in the middle of the day in the summer. That'd be actually when we have the lightest winds for offshore wind. But then in the nights and in sort of the winter portion of the year, you're getting more power out of offshore wind. It sort of ebbs and flows almost opposite the solar power.
Fossil fuels will remain part of the larger power generation mix as a reliable backup. But when the clean sources are producing, they'll knock the fossil fuels out, helping to reduce the state's carbon footprint. Experts say it's important for the Biden administration to stick to this slow phasing in of renewables, especially for consumer acceptance. If the old supply goes away too fast, while demand stays the same, prices would skyrocket. We're seeing some of that right now at the gas pump. During the pandemic, oil production decreased because people weren't traveling. When restrictions eased, people started moving again, while production stayed at pandemic levels.
Fuel prices, our pump prices, is the most transparent energy price consumers, voters see, and they see it every day. You drive down the road. And so nothing kind of makes you angrier is when you have to pay, 30% or 40% more for the same thing that you were paying just, a few months before. So you see this juxtaposition on wanting to move forward and transitioning, but also how to do that in a way that doesn't harm consumers, harm voters.
Frank Fannin served as the Trump administration's top energy diplomat. He now runs an advisory firm focused on all aspects of the energy transition. One thing he says needs much more focus is the critical minerals required to make clean energy happen.
Wind turbines and solar panels just don't show up. They have to be created. And there's an entire supply chain, and there are minerals and metals that go into that supply chain to realize these clean carbon-free forms of energy. The U.S. isn't in control of that supply chain today. China is.
The Trump administration sought to create an alternative supply chain. The goal? Avoid more reliance on our greatest competitor, ensure the clean energy is developed in a manner upholding U.S. values, and remains attractive to investors who value human rights, environmental protections, and transparency. The Biden administration has continued this approach. Fannin says the next step would be using funds from the new infrastructure bill towards accelerated development of mining in North America.
You can't get to the clean energy transition without metals and mining. You can't get there. So we have to deploy this money in a way that makes sense and get some real returns, which means building stuff.
There are also efforts underway to reshore major manufacturing facilities so that we aren't having to import the parts that make up things like wind turbines and solar panels. The new infrastructure bill offers manufacturing tax credits and also cuts through some red tape, like permit decision-making, to speed up the timeline for how long new projects will take to complete. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Still ahead, going behind the scenes of the Chosen Christmas movie with a look at the music makers providing the soundtrack. We'll sit down with Maverick City Music next. The Chosen's Christmas film is part film and part concert in the theater. And among the performers are Phil Wickham, who we've heard from, and you'll hear from him this week on Studio 5 for King and Country, Brandon Lake, Kane, and Maverick City Music. Well, two of the members, Naomi Rain and Joel Barnes, were at the Chosen when we were there, and they sat down with us. This series is, such an audience-driven series. People really hunger for this story and these stories to be told. Did you think twice about being a part of this?
Not at all.
No, not at all.
I mean,
It's time. Be free.
When I heard, I was like, oh no, we're doing this.
Let's do that, for
I
sure.
love the show.
Your messenger said that he would be called Holy, the Son of God.
What is it like singing Christmas music at a place that likely looks like what it looked like when Jesus was born?
It's kind of surreal, like watching the Bible really come to life and the things that you see. It's like you hear about it and you kind of imagine it, but actually like laying your eyes on something is a different thing. It's like watching it really come alive. It's really different, like really different in the best ways though. And it makes this distant cosmic God become really close. And then that makes the difference. I think like for the longest, as a kid, I imagined him as distant and far away, and I had to try to find out where the road is to get there. But then like actually reading the story and like hearing the story as a kid and like being in the spaces and singing the music, it's like, oh no, he's actually very close and present and near.
Some of our worship songs are very much about what we've been through, what we're going through. Like, this is just about God and what he's done, and it's really piggybacking off what you said, but I think it's not, I wasn't even around, and he had already thought of us and was devising this plan that was bigger than me, and so I think that adds a little something to it as well.
Within the last year or two, you guys are everywhere. How did it happen?
We don't really know. We don't really know. I think that 2020 was a very rough year for everyone. And I think that watching like the hope fade in people's hearts was kind of heartbreaking. And I think that the music kind of like God decided to breathe on these little like altars in the form of songs to reignite hope in the hearts of his people.
Always enough, always more than enough. I'm gonna get your thoughts on Jireh, your thoughts on Miracles, because your faces and voices are now synonymous with those tunes.
I'm already loved. I'm already chosen. I know who I am. I know what you've spoken.
Jireh is, I think, one of the songs for this time and season. We wrote it in the midst of the pandemic, where so many people were losing their jobs. They didn't know where the next thing, we didn't know where our toilet tissue was gonna come from, let alone our next meal, And so I think it became an anthem for us, even before we released it, to say that God was going to provide for us, but also, even if it wasn't the way, like monetarily it was that he had already done it, and that what he had said about us, how much he loves us, what he's called us to is just enough. I don't need any more. I love the idea of contentment in a time like now where everything is about convenience, give me more, and indulgence. I'll be content in every circle. Whether you give me a lot, whether I have a little, I'm just gonna be content because you're enough.
It's not coincidence and it's not luck. I know it comes from above. I've got miracles on miracles.
As far as miracles goes, I think that when we think of miracles, we think about like the really grand miracles. We think about like the healing the sick, the raising the dead, like all of the grand things, right? But I think that we oftentimes miss the day-to-day miracles. Like I related my story in the record because like these things should have broken me, should have broken my family apart, should have broken my mother. But watching like God be in the midst of it and like actually gluing us together even more so was a miracle within itself. Because I've seen things like this rip people apart. It caused people to drift away from the Lord. Like they blame God and walk away. So the fact that like everybody like in my family like decided to cling to the Lord instead of run away from him is a miracle within itself. So that's why I love miracles more than anything.
1, 2, 3, 4, I can't even count. Yeah, I can't even count them all.
And you can catch more of Studio 5 this evening on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Although there was severe weather in Hawaii on the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, nothing could keep about 150 World War II veterans from gathering for National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. That included about 40 survivors of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The Hawaii commemoration, just one of many across the country. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden also visited the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. Some sea creatures got a visit from jolly old St. Nick at Sea Life Berlin. A diver dressed as Santa Claus gave stingrays, sharks, and other fish some treats. It's part of St. Nicholas Day, a traditional celebration in Germany in honor of the patron saint of children. In all, some 5,000 underwater creatures enjoyed an early Christmas present. It is time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is devotion. We should all want to live a life of devotion to God, our family, and our friends. And while that may sound a bit lofty and difficult, know this: sincere devotion begins with simple discipline. Do what is right and what is just, even when you don't feel like it. That discipline will become your daily desire, and it brings you to devotion. Think on that for a moment and get started by simply doing whatever is the next right thing to do. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there anytime, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.